What type of roadblocks or other issues have you had in your development as a dominant? If you'd like, share those in the comments, because today we're talking about various roadblocks that dominants face. Hey guys, it's Morgan with BDSM Relationships and Education. Thank you very much for checking out this video about the types of roadblocks or other issues that dominants face along their journey. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel by clicking the button down below and turn on the notifications. That way you'll know every time I post a brand new video. I'm also going to remind you that my new book, Exploring BDSM, has just come out. It is available on Amazon in ebook and in print format, and you can see it's a nice big hefty book. It's a workbook style thing for people that are brand new to BDSM. It's definitely a 101 style, how to explore with a partner, and you don't need to have a partner in order to work through the book. You can do that with, a play partner, you can do it solo, whatever works for you. Anyways, I'm going to get on to the roadblocks that dominants face. So these aren't obviously the only kind of issues that a new dominant might face, and they may not all apply to you. So if it applies, then, you can listen to the advice. If it doesn't apply to you, don't worry about it and just be thankful that this particular one doesn't affect you. So the first sort of roadblock or issue that we run into is the idea that we can be very intimidated by our idea of the ideal dominant. Whether that is something that the media has shown us. So for instance, Mr. Grey as a dominant from 50 Shades, who is this, conventionally attractive, super mega rich, smooth talking guy that is skilled at apparently absolutely everything. He's good at everything he tries, and did I mention that he is filthy stinking rich? So that is like an idea of a dominant that is pretty much unattainable for the vast majority of us. Another example is that sort of media idea of a dominatrix. This, impossibly tall, thin woman with huge boobs, though. Always the huge boobs. And usually a nice round butt. But anyways, she's like tall and thin with the boobs, and she always wears like, 10, 12-inch stiletto heels in a corset, head to toe leather or latex or whatever. And I mean, like, absolutely perfect in every way. And she doesn't really seem to do much of anything other than like wave a riding crop around every now and then and bark some orders and tell people they're worthless worms. But it's that image that we have in our mind, and that's what a dominant woman is. She's only dominant if she's in this get-up, just like he's only dominant if he's like this rich dude that's in control of everything, right? So these are absolutely useless images, right? They are not applicable to the real world. Like these images, we should not be intimidated by them because they are not realistic, okay? It's fantasy, right? A dominatrix, and I've been and sort of, I guess, still am, I don't know. We'll figure that out later. I'm going through some life changes right now, and we're figuring everything out as we go. But I mean, I've worked as a pro dom, and yeah, we're selling a fantasy. The way you see me when I'm dressed up for a session is not the way I am normally. I mean, I am totally a hoodie and leggings kind of girl most of the time, and I mean, I try to dress up for you guys here on YouTube. I like to put my corset on. It makes me feel really good, but I don't sit around all day in this thing. I don't wear heels anymore at all. So, you don't need those things to be dominant. You don't need to be filthy, stinking rich to be dominant. You don't need to be Mr. Grey or, anonymous dominatrix. So don't worry about those images. It's fantasy. It is not what is expected of you. And if you find somebody that does expect that of you, they have unrealistic expectations and need to get their own head out of fantasy land. We can also be intimidated by real life dominance, but the ones that, you know, have all this experience and they're good at all the things, and they're just so awesome, you know, like they walk into a room and they just have this commanding presence, and, you know, they know how to use all of the implements and everything else. And we have to remember in this case, these are real people, for sure. So not only do they have their own set of flaws, because I guarantee you, no matter how perfect somebody looks when they're at the latest dungeon party, they have flaws. Like, there's something wrong with them. They're human, just like anybody else. But you have to keep in mind that they also probably have been doing this for a long time. It's taken time to build those skills, to build that confidence, to just be able to be that person. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, like, I didn't just like poof into existence knowing how to use all the stuff in my dungeon that you guys can't see because it's not in this shot. But all behind you and behind the camera is like, you know, a ton of floggers and paddles and whips and everything else. You know, I mean, I still don't even know how to use the single tail very well, so there's that. But it takes time to learn all these things. It takes time to build the confidence as a dominance. It takes time to build the confidence as a dominant. That's what I was trying to say. Look, you see, even now, I still trip over my words. So those are ones that, you know, it's easy to kind of let our images and what's in our head run away with us. The next one is a little more tough to deal with, and that is the idea of internalized shame around sex, sexuality, and what we can kind of deem deviant behavior. So things like BDSM. Now, this could come from, you know, religious beliefs that have, you know, been ingrained in somebody for a long time that tells them that, you know, sex is something that should only be between a married couple, or that, and it should only be a certain way, and it shouldn't be for pleasure, it should only be for procreation or whatever. So that can be really, really damaging to people. The idea of sexuality, where if we don't fit into that sort of like cis-het category, that our sexuality is wrong, you know, that is told to us by some parts of society, by some religions, and just some people in general. The idea that BDSM itself is deviant behavior, and it's wrong and it's bad and it's perverted or whatever. So these are things, and I don't believe that any of those things are true. I mean, I'm all for you, whoever having their own religious beliefs, please don't get me wrong. I mean, you guys, everybody gets to believe what they want to believe, but you don't get to impose it on other people, and that's the important thing. So if you do have this sort of internalized shame around sex, sexuality, kink, any of it, that can be really, really hard to deal with. It's something that I would highly suggest you work through with a therapist. And I should also mention that it's not just religion that these things come from. You know, it could be, you know, parents that have ingrained this in us. It could be just our society, our culture. It could be any number of things. So these are probably the hardest things to overcome. So definitely, if you are able to, work through it with a therapist. There are all kinds of lists that you can find for sex-positive therapists. If I can find some sort of national ones, maybe for Canada, US, Europe, that sort of thing, I will try to post that in the the description box. And if you guys know of any lists where you can look for sex-positive therapists, then please do post that in the comments for people. You can also try on your own to kind of deal with that, do some introspection, you know, get some self-help books, check out some websites or videos online that will talk to you about this. I think it's very important that we, you know, immerse ourselves in sex-positive spaces. So that's not necessarily spaces where sex is allowed, it's spaces where sex is not shamed, or, you know, any expression of sexuality and form of sexuality is not shamed, and it should not be a space where they encourage or I don't know what the right words are here, but I'm trying to say, like, people like me, aces, should also feel comfortable in these spaces. So if you refrain from sex, that should not be shamed, because there's nothing wrong with being a virgin. You can be kinky and a virgin. That's something I get asked a lot. You can be celibate if you choose. There is nothing wrong with that. Or you can be like myself. You can be asexual, and that's fine too. And that is, of course, not having sexual attraction. I also am not really into sex. They're two separate things, but it tends to get lumped together. Anyways, I'm not going to go on about that. But immerse yourself in sex-positive spaces. I try to make this a sex-positive space as best I can. You know, I don't want to shame anybody for their sexuality. Of course, that doesn't mean that I want to get sexual comments. I don't. And please stop, because I don't want to have to keep erasing them. I get a lot of them. So, come on, again. Let's be mature. The other thing you can do is take some sexuality classes, things like that. Just anything that will help you to see that this is not, you know, a bad thing. You know, BDSM maybe isn't normal exactly, because we are a smaller percentage of the population, but there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with kinksters. I mean, there's been studies done, and I've talked about them before, where there's nothing wrong with us. We are normal people like anybody else. So keep that in mind, and definitely, if you're able to, work through that with a therapist. And our final dominant roadblock is the concept that you are too nice to be a dominant. Dominants don't have to be assholes. I mean, again, we'll go back to that stereotype of the dominant walking into a room and barking orders at people. This is a very unrealistic view of what dominants are. Most dominants are very nice people. Dominants often show love and affection to their submissives. For instance, I'm very polite. I like to always say please and thank you, and you know, I'm rather upset if I am considered not polite. I mean, honestly, I'm Canadian, right? I shouldn't have to say anything more. So, I mean, if I give my dog a command, I say please and thank you. It's kind of funny, to be honest. But when I'm, you know, at home with my boy and I say, oh, honey, could you get me a cup of tea, please? You know, to anyone else, that just sounds like a nice request, but he knows, I know, that that's how I, you know, give an order, or whatever you want to call it. So, dominants don't have to be barking orders and awful people. They can be nice. So I think that we're familiar with this concept. We have to give it a separate name for some reason. When we're talking about male dominance, there's the whole daddy dom concept, where they're more caring and nurturing and loving. But any dominant really can be caring and loving and nurturing. And I think that honestly most are. Most of us, you know, are just decent people, and that's the way we like to be. We just like to have authority or control within our relationships. So guys, that is the video, and I'm curious to know, what roadblocks have you come across? Which ones have you found and overcome? Is there anything you're still struggling with? I'm very curious. Please leave me comments down below, and that way we can kind of address some of these things. Perhaps you guys can share things that worked for you, so that other people reading can learn from a whole bunch of us. But just let me know, what roadblocks have you run into, and what have you successfully overcome? What are you still working on? Anyways, thanks very much. I will see you guys in the next video.